Every honeybee fills with jealousy when they see you out with me. You're much sweeter.
We've been teaching beginner beekeeping classes at the store now for 8 years, and how many years ago? 7 years ago. So the second year that I was teaching beginner beekeeping class, Maggie Knowles came and took my class. And I think when you work in the public school system, you're not supposed to admit that you have a favorite student in class. But I work for myself. I don't have any rules that I have to follow. Maggie was my favorite student that year. I can't deny that. Since then, I've gotten to know her really well. She's an entrepreneur. She runs Muse Relations, public relations firm. She's a gifted writer. She's a talented speaker and teacher. She came and taught a class on healing with honey at the store, and it was a huge hit. But most importantly, she's just a ton of fun to be around. So ladies and gentlemen, Maggie Knowles.
So I was a mess. On the floor, I'd been sobbing for a few days. No sleep, no eating. I had been living in New York for about 6 months, had walked in expecting all the food magazines that I had grown up loving to read would hire me on the spot to be one of their editors. Didn't quite work out that way. Who I had perceived as the love of my life at that time had called me to break up with me. It was one of the hottest summers on record in New York, and I had no air conditioning. So I was heartbroken, broke, and sweaty. And welcome to New York. It was all I could do to call my dad and say, I think I have to come home. So I came back to Maine, spent a few more days in bed, and then had to fix my life. So I grabbed the newspaper, back when people still read newspapers, and I found this house-sitting gig out on Little Sebago. So when I was driving out there to meet the owner, I had seen this sign that said, fresh eggs, farm butter. So I was intrigued, so I drove down this long path to get to this barn, walked inside, and just loving the smell of sawdust and animals and hay, unlike what I had been smelling in Brooklyn for the past few months. And I was so into this natural smell, I didn't hear this person walking behind me. And all of a sudden I heard, hey, do you want to see something cool? So I turn around, and there's this beautiful woman, long crazy hair, flannel shirt, bare feet. We make eye contact, and then she turns and walks out of the barn. And for reference, I am dressed like I still live in New York, like black leather pants, high heel boots, full makeup. But I'm like, seems like the type of woman you follow if she said something to you. So I follow her out of the barn, up this muddy path. So we get to this top of this ridge. She's standing there, I'm standing with her, nothing. She said something cool, I'm expecting to see horses mating, cows getting tipped, I don't know, something big. What are we looking for? What are we looking for? What are we looking for? She's like, wait, the bees are coming home. So it's one of these moments, it's this late fall, golden sunset when that light is just in everything. So I'm watching the horizon, and all of a sudden, I saw them from every direction, these tiny little things flying at us from every direction, back to these boxes that were behind me. And at the time, I still thought beehives were like Winnie the Pooh. I didn't realize all these boxes were actually beehives. And I just stood there letting thousands of bees just fly, like brushing by us to go home. And that was the first time in months I truly felt like everything was going to be okay. So I became a beekeeper, because how do you have an experience like that and not want to know everything you can about bees? So when I found the honey exchange, I became a beekeeper. And a lot of times when you say the word bee, somebody's going to have the reaction, oh, I'm terribly allergic to bees, I'm so allergic to bees. When, in fact, only about 3 to 5% of the population are actually truly allergic to bees. And I am one of those small percentage of people. But I knew there were plenty of safe ways to become a beekeeper despite my allergies, which I did. And then about 3 years ago, it was summer, I had pegged a date to go in and do my hive inspections. And it happened to be this really hot day. And all the bees would not go back in the hive because they wanted to cool down, so I couldn't get the covers back on. So I said, all right, I'll just deal with this later after it cools down at night. So at 9:30 that night, it pops back into my head, oh, I gotta go get the bees back in. So I throw on my suit, but I did not Velcro the bottoms, and I did not have boots on. So I'm out there in the dark, and the bees are still all over the tops of the hives. So I'm scooping them back in, and they're all clustered in like softball-sized clumps. So I'm popping them back in, and I accidentally drop a clump of bees on the ground. Okay. I'll be right with you guys. I'm getting all of them in. And then I realize there's bees crawling all over the outside of my suit. So in horror movies, there's always that scene where the girl who's about to get murdered is on the couch. She's alone. It's raining. The phone rings. She picks it up. There's this creepy, weird breathing. And she realizes the call's coming from inside the house. Well, those bees all over the outside of my suit, the call was coming from inside the house. I froze, realizing that softball clump of bees were now crawling up inside of my suit. Talk about a scary, petrifying moment. So I knew my dad's voice is in my head. Growing up, you panic, you die, you panic, you die. So I'm like, oh no, cannot panic. So I walk back to the house. My husband is asleep on the couch. And I just keep saying his name over and over until he wakes up. So he comes to the door. What? I'm like, we have a problem. You have to get this suit off of me without disturbing the hundreds of bees that are now inside of my suit. And beekeeping suits are one of the least graceful things you can get in and out of. There's Velcro, there's zippers. So he flings open the door, grabs me, and starts trying to get the thing off as fast as possible. I don't remember much of what came next. I remember screaming, don't let them get my face. I remember being in a bathtub of cold water and baking soda. I remember not knowing where the EpiPens were. I remember red welts, literally watching them crawl up my body. And I remember my husband going back to bed. So sad note, we are no longer married. And I'm not a religious person, but I was praying that night. I was 45 minutes in any direction from a hospital, and I truly thought, I did not think I was going to survive that night. It was petrifying. I got stung over 200 times. 200 times. But the next morning, somehow I woke up and I was okay. My friends all joked that was like my Spider-Man, Batman moment, that I was actually going to become like some sort of bee superhero after that. So most people would stop being a beekeeper after that experience. But on the contrary, I wanted to know even more about bees. I wanted more people to fall in love with them. I didn't want people to be afraid of being stung or anything like that, because they are magnificent. But I wanted to know how I could do it in a way that really wasn't being done yet. And I had read that, as back as 5,000 years ago, the ancient Egyptians were using honey as the basis of their medicine. And even a couple of months ago, they found a pot of honey that was about 3,000 years old in a tomb, and the archaeologists were eating it, because honey doesn't go bad. I don't know if you know that. Honey lasts forever. It's amazing. So I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to start creating natural remedies, honey-based, using plants and flowers and this amazing healing nature that's around us to create these recipes. So I started teaching these healing with honey classes. And I was mostly teaching adults. And then I got a phone call one day from South Portland High School. They wanted me to come to a class for their beekeeping club. And high school students, that's the one population, it brings up every anxiety you ever have, is talking to a bunch of 16-year-olds who don't want to be there anyway. So I bring in all my things, and these kids are sitting on the desk, they're on their phones, they could not be, they could not be less interested in me. So I'm rushing through this presentation I just wanted to have it done with. So I have this one recipe. You actually all have it in your programs. You have a few recipes from me in there. So I have this cacao, coconut oil, honey. It's sort of a Nutella spread that's really good for boosting immunity. So I make this. I slap it on apples. I'm passing it out just so I can get out of there. But I realize as I'm passing these little bites out, the room is getting quieter and quieter and quieter. So I get back to my desk, and all these kids are just staring at me. And then they rush the desk, asking me to make more, asking me to email their mom so they'd make it for them. I'm like, I should have opened with this. This would have been better. But we spend the next half an hour basically reteaching everything I had already said because they were fascinated. So it really shows that pretty much every age group, like you've heard so far, from the 4-year-olds all the way up to bees, in their 70s. Like this is a hobby and a passion that really touches everybody. And I'm so grateful for this journey that I've been on, from that moment up on that golden ridge with this amazing stranger, all the way to, sharing recipes with curious minds like yours. And should I ever find myself crying on the floor, whether it be from a sore throat or another broken heart, I know I can make myself feel better. Thank you.